Sahana vavatu, Sahano bhunaktu, Saha viryam karavavahai, Tejasvinavadhitamastu, Ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Sukhamatyantikam yadhyat buddhigrahyamatīndriyam vetti yatra na chaivayam sthitaschalati tattvataha yam labdhva chaparam labham manyate nadhikam tataha yasmin sthito na dukkhena gurunapi vichalyate tam vidhya dukkha sanyoga viyogam yoga sangitam sanishchayena yoktavyaha yogo nirvinna chetasa sankalpa prabhavan kaman tyaktva sarvana sheshataha manah saivendriya gramam viniyamya samantataha shanai shanairuparame buddhya dhriti grihitaya atma samstham manah kritva na kinchidapi chintayet yato yato nischarati manah chanchalamassthiram tatastato niyamyaitat atmanyeva vasham nayet prashantamanasam hyenam yoginam sukhamuttamam upaiti shantarajasam brahma bhutamakalmasham yunjannevam sadatmanam yogi vigata kalmashaha sukhena brahma samsparsham atyantam sukhamashnute sarvabhutasthamatmanam sarvabhutani chatmani ikshate yoga yuktatma sarvatra samadarshanaha yo mam pashyati sarvatra sarvam cha mayi pashyati tasyaham na pranashyami sacha me na pranashyati. Namaskaram, Hari Om to everyone. Warm welcome to Jai Prakash ji, Padmini Ma, and I think Bharti Ma, the sister. Good you can join us today. Now we are doing the 6th chapter of the Gita. We have been through the verses. We are going to revisit the 26th verse, which we partly covered last week. Now, you would notice that the entire proceedings, which is going to last just over an hour or so, is highly interactive. You're very welcome to clarify, be a part in answering any questions. So if there's any doubt, please draw my attention. You will be unmuted and you can be free to say or comment. All right. Now, Hariji, do you have ready access to the Word document of the 6th chapter of the verses? Okay. Now, it just concerned me. It really touched me because Ashrama, whenever we were changing the verses, she was very hurriedly trying to capture photograph of the verses. I feel sorry for not sending this across to you all. So if you could just share the document on the satsang group, Rajima and Hariji, if you can just drop it in the chat box. So Ashama and those who don't have that document, please download it. If you have a printer, just take a copy. You will have easy access to the chanting as well as the translation. And for those who have difficulty reading the Sanskrit text, there is transliteration as well. Okay. So sorry for that, Ashama. Right. So the verses 25 to 32 spoke about, or going to speak about, how the process of meditation helps reveal the self in one and all. The 25th verse, he said, little by little, let him withdraw by the intellect held firm, having established the mind in the self, let him not think of anything else. Shanai, Shanai, Uparamet. The whole exercise, why does he qualify the withdrawal process as Shanai, Shanai, little by little? In order to gain a mastery over oneself, or in short, spiritual edification and inner transformation, just boils down to a capacity to keep your mind at bay. It just boils down to that. Your entire exercise, whatever be the nature, you have to get a mastery over your mind, get a control over it, so that you could direct it wherever you wish it to. Now, what that presupposes is that we do not have a control over our own mind. In effect, what's happening is our actions, our emotions, our thoughts, everything is not under our control. So the moment you gain a mastery over your mind, as the great Vivekananda said, you conquer your mind, you have truly conquered the world. So that entire success, this real success, whether be it worldly success, whether be it spiritual success, it all boils down to controlling of your own mind. And who is the best judge of that? You yourself, isn't it? How can I sit in judgment to what extent you have a control over your mind? It's impossible. I remember in my initial days in Malaysia, there was a student. I don't want to mention his name because now I do not know where this knowledge is going. I don't mean to be any personal or insult him or make him feel awkward. But a young guy, very successful. I just got to know him, and he took a sort of a liking to the knowledge. He took a liking to me more than a student-teacher relationship. We were very good friends. We became very friendly. He really found an avenue where he could open up and discuss matters of life which perhaps nobody was purview to. And I remember a time came when he said, Vinayji, I just want to have a little time. And I know I can trust that this is something which you will not share. And I'm actually sharing with everyone. So I'm breaking the trust. No, I'm not going into the detail. What I'm trying to tell is, here is a man, young guy, well-educated, educated abroad, very well placed in the corporate world, left his mark already in that little corporate life he had led for 15, 20 years. His worked. He was a role model for everybody in the family, including his parents used to gloat at their son that how successful he is. Every second week he was in some part of the world traveling and meeting, and it's all jet life he led. Used to say how his niece and nephews used to come and want to emulate him. And he said he didn't tell this to anyone. And he was actually opening up to me. There was something eating up inside him. It was actually eating him up. And every time people used to admire him, wanting to emulate him, he used to feel a heavy sense of guilt within. And I didn't know that. As I said, I did not know. I don't know what's going on in your minds. You're all very presentable, very charming, very, very beautiful, lovely people, but don't know what's happening in the state of your mind. And all my life, I'm only dealing with minds of people. It's not the, there is an analogy in the Shastras given, a human being is compared to a coconut. You know why a human being is compared to a coconut? Don't worry, I'll not lose my track. I'll come back to this much interesting masala story I'm telling. But the Shastras talk about a coconut. A coconut is often taken as a chosen fruit, as an offering to a temple, because a coconut resembles a human being in its entirety. I will not go into the detail. The rest of the half an hour would go by if I just go into the intricacies of the coconut. But when you look at the coconut, when the coconut is off the tree, the outer part of the shell, the outer covering of the coconut is round and smooth and bright, isn't it? That symbolizes the physical body. The physical body is round and smooth and presentable and charming, beautiful. But if you were to attempt to take a strong screwdriver and just attempt to get into that which lies beneath that smooth covering, a very thin layer of covering, you have the tightly knit matted locks of the coir. So tight that if you don't have the right tool, you would struggle to remove the coir or you would break the tool. But if you have the right tool, you find it's such an effortless process of removing the coir. And then you have the hard shell, and then there's a kernel. The kernel is the Atman, the self. The hard shell is the causal body, the vasanas. Now, what I'm comparing here is beneath that smooth layer of the coconut covering, there is this coir which is so tightly knit, so difficult to separate from the causal body. That coir symbolizes the state of a human mind, a state of human mind which is infested with desires, countless desires, innumerable desires. And the Shastras give personification of entertaining desire as Ravana. So there's, in fact, remember, there's a Ravana sitting in all our minds. The moment you desire for something, it is you are asking for something more, which exactly Ravana asked for Sita. And he found it quite plausible. And he says, what's wrong in wanting Sita? That's your mind. That's my mind. Remember that there is a Ravana in my mind. My mind is a Ravana. So he just wanted one more. Your mind has got these desires, cravings, multitude of emotions of anger, hatred, jealousy, envy. No doubt there are positive emotions as well. And then there is attachments, greed. All of that put together is the state of the mind, which is symbolized by the coir, which is tightly knit, which is beneath the outer covering. So beneath these pleasant personalities, I am not sitting in judgment, please. That is not of none of my business to get into what lies within you, what is the state of your mind. It is your business. In fact, there's a beautiful saying, mind is and will always be our primary business in our lives. So please make it. Our mind is and will always be our primary business in our lives. Disregard everything else, please. For God's sake, just for a moment, disregard everything else and start looking at yourself. And it becomes the pivotal point of what you are, who you are. It defines you. You are defined by the mind. It is your business. It should be nobody else's business. Now, my appeal to you is make it your own business. MYOB. Correct, huh? Now, of late, I'm trying to know all these acronyms. So I communicate to certain people and then I don't understand what they're saying. So now very soon you'll be seeing that I'll be using a lot of new acronyms. Correct, Rajima? Am I right? That doesn't mean it's from her. I'm just saying that's all. No, I don't. You understand me, isn't it? Sorry, Ma. I didn't intend to say that, but you know. Hari Om, Rajima. So going back to the story, that fellow who used to feel as if he's using a couple of daggers into himself. Every time when somebody praised him, gave him credit for all his success, he fell actually in his own perception. And he told me that his mind was creating havoc within. Havoc is not a word. If I were to get into the detail, you'll not believe me. So literally he said, he was saying, I'm leading a life of utter hypocrisy. What I am seeing is not what I am within. And I don't know how to resolve this, how to come to terms with this, because I am successful, I am brilliant, I have created a mark, there's no doubt about it. And yet, there is this glaring disparity, that a striking contrast, that he couldn't keep his mind at his bay. I'm almost so tempted to get into it, but then I know what is the state of the mind. In fact, I'm reminded of my early days in Hyderabad when I was started lecturing. A very well-known industrialist, I'll not take his name again. He came up to the lectures and then he wanted to know who is the organizer, who is coordinator here. And they directed, he got me. And he called me after lectures and it said, sir, I want to attend your classes, but I can't come in public because there is security issues. I have security issues. I hope you understand me. I am seriously interested. Would you come and teach me? Those days I didn't have any students. So anybody said, teach me. I said, chalo, chalenge, not really, but he was very, very keen. I understood his concern. We spoke in detail. I said, wherever you are, you will be chauffeur driven, picked up and dropped back. Not an issue. However long you have time to teach me, I am thy student. And then I used to go to his house somewhere in Jubilee Hills, interior part. I'm talking in 96, 95, 96, I started lecturing. And he used to send his car driver, pick me up. And he, next to his bungalow, the 3-4 bungalows surrounding are his bungalows, security. So one bungalow he converted as a spiritual center for himself. And there we used to have satsangs. It started one-to-one, and then he opened it up to his family and then his friends. And there were a handful of them. I taught them for a few years. And why I'm referring to that is, he is a man very successful. I tell you, he is one of the top in the country in his field of activity, in his business. And one of the things he used to tell me was, and he used to say, you don't mind me calling you Vinay? I said, by all means, sir. What is there? You're like my grandfather. I'm like a grandson. Please, I was just 20, I just came from the ashram and, we're just teaching. Vinay, my problem is I'm unable to sleep. What is the disease called? What is the disease not able to sleep? Insomnia, na? Harishi, how do you know that?
When not in deep sleep, I do know.
When you don't go to sleep, you have insomnia. In fact, a lot of people have this problem. I'm not saying you have that, but a lot of people have this problem. They don't confess it. In fact, as I said, the state of mind is a very unhealthy state, and it's a stigma. So people don't open up. So this gentleman used to tell me that I'm not able to sleep. And I believe there's something in this knowledge that helped me. And believe me, in a matter of 3-4 months, he went up on advocating. That's how we could get few co-friends of his to attend the classes. Advocating, I'm able to sleep. He went about advocating to people, my biggest problem was sleep. He had everything he could have asked for. As I said, security around him. And one of the things I remember telling me, those days he had imported a Mercedes S500, then 25 years ago, I'm talking, that was not available in the country. He said, I've imported this car from Germany and I've paid X amount of price because I want my only son to drive this car because this has got maximum number of airbags. So every time my son goes out, I get paranoid. My mind starts imagining things. I hope he doesn't have an accident. If he has an accident, what will happen to him? Your mind is creating havoc within. You are able to relate to it? And things started settling down. He started able to relate to it. That is all this I'm explaining by the word Shanai, Shanai, Oparame. Little by little, you got to withdraw the mind with the intellect. You've got to use the strength of your intellect to withdraw the mind, whatever be the cause. And having got the mind under control, you've got to redirect it to something higher. So the fundamental principle is you've got to first learn to go along with the mind. And thereafter, you can give it a direction or a guidance. You should not stand against the mind and challenge the mind. If you were to stand against the mind and challenge to wanting to control it, it's not going to be easy. It is never going to be easy. Never ever poo-poo the strength of your mind. But Minima, if I can ask you, it is very difficult to control the mind, doesn't it? Agree?
Yeah.
So we should never ever stand against the mind with a certain amount of notion that I can control it, isn't it?
That's true.
Why is it you think so?
I think it's because of its stubborn nature, that when we think that this is right, we stick to it, that this is right. And even if people say, like, I'm just thinking in that way, that if suppose I have certain ideology or something, that this is right, and if other person is saying no, it's very difficult to change your stand, what you believe in. Basically, it's what your mind believes.
So there's something in you tells you that what you believe is wrong.
Correct.
Isn't it possible? There's another voice that tells you that I don't think there's a right thing to do, but still we don't have the force to withhold what the mind is. The onslaught, isn't it?
Correct. So sometimes there is a continuous fight between should we do this or not do this? And we know that maybe what is coming from behind that mind, subconscious mind, maybe that this is not right, but we still do it because we just can't stop.
We just can't stop. This is a problem across the board. It starts from a very young age. You know where the problem starts? It starts from a very young age. And as one grows up, we have made this mind a very well-fed, robust mind. Imagine if you start giving into the mind, start pleasing the mind, start appeasing the mind to whatever it has asked for. And if you have never ever challenged it, if you never ever exercised the intellect, what happens? There is a well-fed mind and an emaciated intellect. And if these two people, imagine one is a well-fed wrestler, another one is an emaciated one. If they are put to fight, what will happen?
Nervous breakdown or something?
No, he doesn't have to fight. He just, if I blow, maybe the monitor will fall down. I don't want to blow harder, you know. He will say, that fellow will fall down. Imagine Muhammad Ali and any one of us fighting against Muhammad Ali. He'll fall down. That kind of strength. So the mind has got formidable strength. And it is presenting itself in many a way, isn't it? In fact, just for the benefit, other day in the class we were mentioning, to control this mind, there are 4 factors that are there that help us, that we need to rely on to challenge the mind, to handle the mind which is challenging us. We mentioned the 4 things. I don't know which class, but little recent ago, we spoke about it. Srinivas Garu, are you able to recall? Because there's a constant tug of war between the mind and the intellect, between the mind and the other forces.
Yes. I'm not able to recall.
All right, fair enough, no problem. Vaidyanathan ji.
We were talking of, oh, where is my? We were talking of the conscience, the intellect, the purushartha, and the mind to control.
There are a couple of things you said right. To control the mind, obviously we need to use our free will. Free will is that
Purushartha.
freedom with which Purushartha, we all have the freedom to do what you want to do with your life. Unlike an animal doesn't have the free will, isn't it?
Correct.
We have the freedom to do what we want, but sadly we're not using that freedom wisely. So the free will is there.
The
You
intellect.
use your intellect, the buddhi is there. What else have you got?
We have the conscience that guides both. You know, there's a silent voice telling you what is right and wrong.
There is that conscience within, that voice within which tells you. And then there is this wisdom that we are all seeking.
Right.
If you become unmindful of this wisdom and have a hankar, I know what life is, I've seen life, I know everything, you will succumb to the mind and what the mind does to us, isn't it?
True.
Right. So this wonderful. So these two, the 25th verse, and then he leads us into the 26th verse as well, which clarifies the same thing. You know, Sitaramji, in fact, you have commented something beautiful. I would like you to clarify what that is. You say many successful people suffer from imposter syndrome. I hope I've pronounced it correctly. All too flowery. Please don't talk such flowery words. I am not capable of understanding all these things.
Are you able to hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Well, it's in psychology, this is a very commonly used term of imposter syndrome, where imposter means somebody who's who's acting what he's not. That's the imposter. So many successful people feel that they have risen to that position not because of their own capabilities, but because of factors, others' influence, and all that, and are not very sure whether they can really do the job. So they suffer from this imposter syndrome, but which many times they suffer from it because of the lack of self-confidence. Not that they're not capable, but more because of the lack of self-confidence. It's a very commonly used term. So the gentleman that you mentioned earlier in Malaysia or wherever, he could also be having that kind of imposter that I've got so much, but really, am I worth it? Am I capable of doing these things? And it leads to enormous amount of cognitive dissonance in the mind.
No, he was very clear that he's intelligent, he's smart, but he knows exactly where he's lacking. He's not able to control his mind.
Yeah.
See, he was a student of this knowledge. He was a student. He just ended up confessing, and he got a great amount of help how to control that mind. He got it. He knew. After he was fairly able to keep its mind in its place. So you're not wrong. It's very common. It's very common.
Quite common. Yeah.
Quite common. Okay.
I have one question, Guruji, which is, isn't intellect more or less similar to the conscience?
So you know the intellect. How do you know the intellect? The intellect is known because intellect gives you a choice to choose from. The famous words of Hamlet, am I right? To be or not to be, that is the question. whether it's nobler in the minds to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take up arms against a sea of trouble and to end them by opposing. So am I to take up these arms, or am I to give it up? So the dilemma, the moment you have a dilemma, it's an intellect. The moment you're on the beginning of a fork, it's the intellect. That problem doesn't exist with the mind, it doesn't exist with the conscience. You must know what it is by the behavior, by the conduct, by the way it expresses itself. There was a time ago we went through in detail, we learned through the voices within. How many voices were there within, Gayatri Ma?
3 voices.
I'm hearing 10 voices.
3
You're
voices.
so loud. You're so loud. Suddenly I heard so many more voices than the 3 voices. Correct. The 3 voices within. Some, maybe we will, Rajima, just share that link later on in the group so people can fall back on this. Because there was an exhaustive comparative study. How do I know the voices within? But since you asked, is the intellect a conscience? The intellect is not conscience. Intellect, as I've said, gives you a choice all the time to choose from. You could be having a very clear choice, but yet you have a choice to choose from. The mind doesn't have a choice. The mind is very clear what it wants to do. And the conscience is that which gives you the path to the truth. That's all. Conscience only tells you what is the right thing to do. Now you can choose to follow it. You can choose to disregard it. That choice as an intellect you have, which is what we said is the free will. I have the freedom to follow what my conscience is telling, or I can choose to follow what it's saying. I choose it, or I said, go to hell with you. Is your question as straightforward, or is something more you're asking there?
It is as straightforward, because I thought intellect also tells you as to what is wrong and what is right, and then you have to choose that. So
It does.
conscience
It does.
also tells you what is the right thing.
See, conscience doesn't even tell you. It just points towards the truth. That's all.
Yes.
If you go against it, there's a guilt.
Yeah.
If you follow it, it is calm. So when you know that the conscience is supporting what you're doing, there is no other feeling of discomfort within. When you feel a sense of discomfort, when you feel a sense of uneasiness, when nothing seems to look back at you and shout at you, as we say, when an action insults you, that is when you have committed a sin, isn't it? So the presence of conscience is felt when you feel a sense of guilt or remorse within. But if you feel you have not done anything wrong, as simple as someone who jumps a signal, he very well knows, very well knows that what he has done is wrong. His conscience is pricking. But is an act per se right or wrong? No, there's nothing right and wrong, as we often say. An ambulance is given clear license to break every possible rule to reach its destination. The driver is pardoned. He is given the license and the permission to do what he has to do. So breaking the signal is not wrong for an ambulance. But it's wrong for you and me not to follow. You're very wrong. So conscience props up. It becomes alert. The conscience becomes erect and alerts you when you're not on the right path. And interestingly so, you also know it is wrong at times. Sometimes you may not know. Sitaramji, at times you may not know whether you're right or wrong. Then what happens? So I'm not going into the detail. Please fall back on that video I was talking about. It deals with it in detail, but I'm just mentioning the different dynamics that gets involved with it. At times you know whether you're right or wrong, but there are times you do not know when you're right or wrong. Then what happens to the conscience?
It's unable to direct you to in the proper way. Conscious also is lost. Because you do not know what is right and wrong, then it's extremely difficult to find the right way.
So not knowing right or wrong can be construed as
being the right way to do it.
no, I do not know. I do not know is
That's right.
ignorance, isn't it? I'm
Ignorance.
ignorant about
Yeah.
it. So my question is, how does conscience react to ignorance? Very interesting. It's something, it just baffles how our system is made, how all this functions. N number of times you dig it, there's something you unearth from it. There's something there to take it. That's the beauty of the study. See, we don't have knowledge of all with us, isn't it? We're not all knowledgeable. So there are realms of ignorance we operate. And when we are ignorant on certain matters, how does your conscience react to that? Ramji?
Namaskar, Guruji.
Sir, I don't understand this appearance and disappearance. It's like a Vishwarupa Darshan. Suddenly, Lord Vishnu appeared and suddenly he folded back,
No, we have actually 2-3 computers going on simultaneously. So the Wi-Fi can't put up with all videos. So
Put up another Wi-Fi.
I'll have to do that.
No, just kidding. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. So I was saying that when we are in, when we don't know what is right or wrong, and conscience can't guide us in such situations because there is no reference book available for that, then I think you have to take a decision based on, you have to use your intellect, in my opinion. You have to see what is.
Sir, my, if I can pause you here and I get back to the question. When you have performed an action arising out of ignorance,
Okay.
how does conscience react to an action you've performed out of ignorance?
Well, I don't think
we are not talking about revisiting an action or exercising the intellect. The moment you say intellect, it becomes conscious. There is knowledge, there is analysis. You have a choice. You know what is right, what is wrong. All that comes in, isn't it? Those factors come in.
Intellect may still analyze and say that you don't know. I can't make out what is right or wrong. Circumstances, this is the best thing to do. So you will get some guidance from intellect, because that is where you will use all your experience, your knowledge, and various things that you have gone through to take a decision. But conscience, I don't think plays any role there. I mean, this is what I call my own ignorant opinion on this. So conscience, I don't think has any guidance to give in such situations. But when you face the consequences of your action, then you may realize, but that is a post analysis, the post fact analysis. But I think when you are taking the decision, I don't think conscience plays any role. This is my own ignorance talking. Yes.
No, we are talking of ignorance at large, sir. Now, see, taking an example, can anybody think of an example? I don't want to give into everything. For those of you coming for the first time, my job is to make you all think. My job is not to give you answers. If I can make you think in the process you learn, it's a far, far better thing I could ever do. than just merely parroting the Shastras. Hmm? Hmm? So what was the question? Gayatri Ma, what did I ask just now?
If an action is performed and the conscious is not aware of, in an ignorance what we have done, the conscious is not aware of it, what is the consequence?
No. My question was, can you think of an example when to just justify this, that when you act out of ignorance, I agree with Ramji that conscience doesn't play a role, it is quiet. As the saying goes, ignorance is bliss, isn't it?
Yeah.
When you're ignorant about it, you're blissfully unaware what you have done, what your actions have incurred, what consequences you're paying, you do not know. You know, many of my students, not here, but Malaysia and other parts where they have actually lived a life, they have all their life, they have been meat eaters, all their life. That's the culture. They're born into that kind of an environment, and eating meat is never a question. But once they have embraced this knowledge, as I've said, there is no precondition, there's no condition for you to pursue it, but they themselves felt uncomfortable continuing something which they had done from their very young age. Some of them much later into their life. And they felt uncomfortable and they chose to become vegetarian, not because of a condition laid or because of a force, but there was a certain discomfort they felt within. And they found difficult to convey this to others, even their family members. They said, no, please don't force me. I think I'm not comfortable. You can carry on. I know a lady as a mother, she used to cook for her son and give, but she felt uncomfortable. I would not say no to you, but I will not take it. So the moment she became conscious, there is knowledge, instantly the conscience starts playing. But before that, all her life, she didn't feel anything wrong with it. So can you say she committed a sin before? No. But knowing well and the conscience confronts and she continues to do, she's committing a sin. I know I'm not supposed to do, and I continue to do it, it is sinful. So ignorance is bliss. Can you think of any example? Think as a fresh. And if you want to have fresh example, we need to ask a fresh comer, newcomer. So you don't mind me asking Bhartima.
Hello, namaste.
Namaskar, ma. You must have been understood by now. This fellow is tired of listening to these old people all the time, same thing coming and again. They are not leaving me wherever I go. So any new face comes, I hold on to them until another new face comes.
Okay, fair enough. That's okay.
I'm just joking. Don't take it literally.
No, I am not scared. Also.
No, please.
So, like what you said, that the conscience, how it reacts to ignorance, and an example you are asking for that. So I have a son, and now he's 16 years old. But in this whole parenting process, I have come across so many times, that, sometimes, we think that the child is saying something, and out of habit, they are saying, I don't want to study. For example, small example like that, I don't want to study because I'm having a headache. Now, as a parent, 80% of the time, sometimes they are making up the thing that they don't want to study because they don't want to study. As a child, it is not fun to study. So, you try to balance as a parent that, okay, sometimes you let go and sometimes you're a little stern on them because it's good for their schooling and their education. And there are times when there is actually, the child is suffering, there is some acute pain, and you have not listened. And then later on you realize and you are conscious that, that what I did was wrong. So I have faced situations like these many times. And so I then try to improve that, I should see a little bit more, dig closely to all the factors that actually he's saying the truth or he is not.
No, I can perfectly relate to the example you're given in your own life, where you had conducted in a particular way as a mother to a child. And perhaps you realized that there are more factors that could be involved. And when you became conscious of it, you couldn't continue to be unmindful as you were earlier, isn't it? So if you continue to behave the same way, perhaps you feel, no, I think I should give the benefit of doubt to my son. Why is he behaving that way? Is there any condition? Not that there is a condition, but you should examine.
Yes.
Isn't it?
Yes.
I'm so glad you're able to think along, and the example was apt and beautiful. Very good.
Thank you.
Appreciate. Yeah, Srinivas Reddy Garu, you want to say something, sir?
Yes, Guruji, I just get into the point, like when you mentioned that ignorance is bliss. I think COVID-19 made whole world is in blissful situation. And what I mean to say that there is no free will, no intellect, no conscience, no wisdom. None of those things we are in a position to apply, to find and understand the root cause of the issue. So how do we correlate? So we are in a so ignorant world.
I don't, sir, don't mute yourself. I don't understand the question. What are you asking, sir?
What I'm saying, sir, the ignorance is bliss is the one which
Yes.
Now, taking the example of COVID-19.
All right.
Okay, the ignorance level at the vaccine producers, the doctors, the patients, because we are not able to find the root cause of that, the real reason beyond that. The mutants are changing, issues are coming up, things are varying there. So in a process of this situation where we are going through as an individual, so how do we really apply that the free will or the intellect or the conscience or the wisdom, which we're talking about, the 4 ways where we can able to control our mind?
See,
okay.
If I've understood you right, you said there we all have been facing this serious life-threatening challenge of this virus. Now, when it came into our lives, we all were ignorant about it. We all did many things, and we all paid the price for such acts in the initial stages. Now there's so much of awareness and so much of research, study, and vaccines have come out because of that study and examination. Today, in fact, other day somebody was saying that somebody is choosing not to take vaccine because they have their own arguments.
Yes.
So
exactly, Guruji. That's what I mean to say. I'm sorry to hold on you there, but what we learned something from the first stage, from the second stage, but second stage also, the virus also equally intelligent enough in managing the things, and like how mind has been powerful. We are all not able to do, like we're talking about airborne, we are not able to control. There was absolutely a clueless situation, and the youngsters also just dropping, and they are not able to. Earlier, we used to say isolation of an individual could able to get out of the situation, or we could able to get control. Now, there's no isolation is going to have any meaning in the whole of controlling the issue. So in a situation like this, I would like to just understand, getting into the note where we're talking about how a mind can able to bring in these factors force.
So, another thing happens in ignorance, on areas of ignorance, is surrender.
Okay.
So when you do not know something, the least I can do is put aside my arrogance, put aside my knowledge, and take someone's advice and follow it have great faith in it. You must have faith and surrender, because it's a field of my ignorance. Am I a research scientist? Am I a doctor? Now I can put all the information I can get a hold of and try to make sense of it, but it could be imperfect, isn't it? My thinking could be imperfect. The information I get is imperfect. So the least I can do is surrender to those people who have dedicated their times and their life to unearthing a vaccine in times of dire situations, and they have a solution. Now, you may have no faith in it, but if you have no faith in it, you pay the price of your own lack of surrendering. You pay the price. It's like we are arguing in realms of ignorance.
Yeah.
Say, I go to an auditor and tell how he should start auditing. I go to an architect and tell how he should design architecture. As absurd as me going and telling a doctor that there's something wrong with his medicine. On what standpoint am I talking? So we should be conscious of at least areas of our ignorance and just surrender, just mellow down. It's very important. And if we don't, that arrogance and knowledge starts interfering. So the importance of surrender would help there, sir.
Thanks, Guruji.
Okay. Thanks. Hariji, just before I can come to you, Annapurnama wanted to say something. Yes, Annapurnama.
Namaste, Guruji.
Yes, ma'am. Namaskar.
Regarding when ignorance, when there is ignorance, conscience won't insult or pray. I just thought of an example, like when I'm in a situation where I see somebody needs blood, but though the group may be same, I have so many doubts. I'm ignorant about the details. Like if I have so many, some chronic issues, whether I can donate the blood or not. Because of that, if I decide, okay, I cannot, then the conscience, I feel, won't break. Maybe won't insult. There is no play. It will like kind of, it gives you a bail. And in another situation where the moral would come into play, like when I go to temple, and outside there'll be a lot of alms seekers, beggars. But if I think, if I'm able to convince or justify myself, like, no, I put it in the hundi, God will take care of, God will see to it, to whomever it reaches, he will take care. That view will make my conscience silent. And also in a situation of helplessness, like when there is an accident, like when the bridge, we all read about the bridge coming down and so many cars getting stuck underneath, and if somebody we see is in pain and they have to be saved. But in such a situation, an individual, there is very little an individual can do. So in a situation of helplessness also, the conscience forgives. I don't know, I don't know whether I'm right or wrong. This is my thought.
No, yes, in fact, you're very right, ma. You make absolute sense in what you have said. When you are helpless, when you can't do much, and the best thing is to be silent or pray, or when you can't do much, perhaps you have to accept it. Conscience supports it. Yes, you're right. No, I agree to it, what you're saying. All right. So moving on, yes, Hariji, namaskar, ma. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Hari Om, Guruji. Guruji, regarding conscience, can we consider conscience like an equipment, like our mind and intellect? Is it an equipment?
The question which Hariji is asking is conscience an equipment like the mind and intellect? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
In fact, mind and intellect itself is not an equipment. Mind and intellect is not an organ. You can't locate the mind and intellect in the physical anatomy. Mind and intellect is a function. So if you're comparing the conscience to the mind and intellect as a equipment, mind and intellect is not an equipment. It's not a organ. It is not, it is just a function. So conscience also is a function. Mind and intellect is in the body. It operates in the body. It is subtler than the body. It is not the gross, the subtle aspect.
Yeah, okay.
Now, when we say mind and intellect is a function, mind and intellect are basically constituted of thoughts, sankalpa, thoughts, isn't it? So when these thoughts of yours, when they have an irrational flow to it, when you don't give a rhyme or a reason when you do something, it is the mind. Remember this. When there is no rhyme or a reason, like I like jackfruit. And my mouth is still watering. The other day somebody gave me lovely jackfruit. That's why I remembered example jackfruit. I like jackfruit. No, you can't ask me why you like jackfruit. I like jackfruit. You may give a kind of a reason, but your mind has got a liking to it. I don't like watermelon. I don't like the texture or the color. I don't like. I feel something uneasy. I don't like it. That's all. There's no discussion thereafter. So an irrational aspect in you is the mind. So when thoughts go without a logic and reason, is the mind. But when the thoughts become rational, analytical, discriminative, it is the buddhi, the intellect. So these two, so in fact, there is no two things as mind and intellect. There's only one thought.
Yeah.
The bifurcation under the thought makes it the function, operation of the mind and the operation of the intellect. And as you know, the intellect, just for some who technical, the intellect is again becomes gross or subtle based on its operation. So when I use my intellect in worldly matters, it becomes gross. But when I use the same intellect in understanding the transcendental, it becomes subtle. We call it. So just in discussion purposes, there's something called as subtle intellect and gross intellect. Just for discussion, for those who are not familiar with this concept, just jot it down. Intellect has subtle and gross. Now, conscience is an aspect of your subtle intellect. Now, your question is conscience something similar to the mind and intellect as an equipment? No, it is not an equipment. It is a function, and conscience is an aspect of your subtle intellect. So all come under one umbrella. The subtle, which drives the gross body into action. Is it? Is it okay? Ramji is commenting, in fact, intellect is always associated with the brain and mind to the emotions. Emotions are to the heart. Is that association right? Yes, you're right, sir. But you can't say the anatomical heart is the philosophical mind. You can't say that. They're two different things. The philosophical mind perhaps operates through the anatomical heart. The philosophical head operates through the anatomical head, which is the brain. So when you're going through some heavy study or you're examining a serious document and you have over-exercised your intellect, you hold your head because you feel a certain strain, you know. And also when you feel a certain love or an emotion, it seems to generate in the heart, isn't it? So the emotions operate, but you can't cut open the heart and say, where are the emotions? You can't find them. No surgeon ever found it, and he will never find it, because it's just a function, not an organ or an equipment. But we can, you can draw a parallel. You're right. Okay. Bhartima, you want to clarify what you're asking?
So I always thought conscience meant the soul, means you. So is there a difference between the soul and the conscience? You said that conscience is a part of the subtle intellect. So it is still a function. But soul is not a function. Soul is ever pervasive. So conscience is different from the soul?
Absolutely. Conscience has got nothing to do with the soul. In fact, conscience is said to be the messenger of God. I repeat, conscience is said to be the messenger of God, because the only thing, the job a conscience has, is, and does is to point towards the path of reality. So if you follow conscience, you are upholding Satyam. Satyam asti. I am truthful because I am true to myself. It's not whether I'm truthful to you or somebody else, but I must be truthful to myself first, isn't it? And when am I truthful to myself? When I hear to the conscience. So when I am, why am I truthful to myself? Because conscience only takes me to the path of truth, which is the reality, which is the path of salvation, ultimate liberation. So if you want to get to God, if you ever want to uplift yourself as a human, to do the right thing, follow the conscience, because conscience would never, ever go wrong. Your mind can go wrong, your intellect can go wrong.
I agree to that part, but I am not understanding the difference between the human consciousness, my personal consciousness, and the soul of my body. The soul, which is.
Oh, sorry, could you come again? Sorry, what you're asking?
I'm not understanding the difference between the conscience and the soul. Like, for example, when I'm meditating, and I, after some time, when I feel that stillness and I feel that oneness, or you know, that that one part that comes when you feel, you know, you are aligned somewhere. You feel like, you know, that you are aligned and you are still. I mean, there are no thoughts and there are no, you know, reactions happening right now at that moment, and it's just stillness. So I am connecting to my conscience, or I am connecting to my soul, or I'm listening to my soul. I mean, what is the difference between the two? I am not understanding that. Conscience and soul.
See, the term soul indicates the often term we use as God. The soul, or the God, or Atman,
yes,
Brahman, or you can call it the consciousness.
Yes,
the consciousness of God, which is all pervading. It's everywhere, isn't it? So when you go through any spiritual exercise, whether you are trying to calm your mind, or when you're trying to perform a certain prayer, or you go through any spiritual exercise, you're aligning your thoughts to the totality. You're aligning your thoughts to the divine. So you're nullifying your egoistic thought, you're embracing the totality. So your actions are towards the consciousness.
Okay.
Now, you may attain that experience relatively when you are in that so-called zone, that experience, that satsang. But when you come out of that experience, and when you are not aligned with the totality, when there is ego and there's a conflict with the world, your conscience tells you, my dear, you're going wrong.
Right.
You must align to the totality, the total scheme of things. Let's say, just an example, let's say there are 5 people or 6 people who are living in your house.
Yes.
That is the totality, is the life of 5, 6 people in the house. You have an individuality, you may have your choices, your preferences to live a life in a particular way. But is it not right for you to find out, are my actions resonating with the totality, which is the family I'm living with?
Yes.
You may be living in a community, in a condominium, or in a community where there are 100 families. Am I not be conscious that my actions, is it resonating with the totality of the community I'm living in?
Yes.
Am I not conscious that my actions must resonate with the country, humanity at large? So you start raising the bar to what totality you are attuned to. Now, when you are attuned to attaining realization, that is the loftiest of goals one can ever aspire to reach. And your conscience will tell you how to deal with your son. It will also tell you how to attain moksha realization. It will take you right up to that point. The question is whether am I able to heed it? Am I able to respect it, honor it, and uphold it?
Okay, I've understood.
So the difference is, soul is the consciousness. Conscience is the messenger which will point you, take you to the consciousness. Just an example to conclude, and I leave it at that. The example often given to understand conscience is said to be like a mariner's compass.
Okay.
A mariner, when he navigates in the open seas, he has no reference point to navigate the ship. So what is it that gives him a sense of direction in that directionless, in that voyage?
So will it also be something like intuition? The intuition is also part.
Intuition is not conscience. In fact, Bhartima, I would recommend you, suggest you to just fall back on that talk which analyzed the 3 voices within. Now it's a similar class like this with a lot of interaction, with a lot of questions, clarification. It brings a certain depth out of the concept. It's not a pravachan. It's not like a lecture. It's like an interactive session. So you'll find questions clarified which may not come to your mind. See, so it is not intuition, but it is, interestingly so, conscience is the same in a sinner and a saint. Everything else is different. Obviously, the consciousness is the same, but the body, the mind, the intellect, the thoughts, everything is different. But in a sinner and saint, the conscience is the same. It's like a mariner's compass that constantly points towards the truth. It takes him towards the reality. So, and as Shakespeare says, to thine own self be true, and it must follow as night the day. Thou canst not then be false to any man. If you're true to yourself, then you're not false to anybody else. So in every act, in every thought, in every emotion, am I true to myself is the question I got to ask. And if I'm true, I am not answerable, I am not justifiable to anybody else. I got to be true to myself. The famous words of, which play is this, Harishi? Any idea? Which play is it? Sitaramji, any idea? Such a famous quote. To thine own, what am I missing? It's a Polonius advice to Laertes in the play Hamlet. It is Hamlet. In fact, the very famous advice, Polonius, the father, gives a personal advice to Laertes, his son who is going for higher education. and he gives a parting message. It is the most valuable piece of English literature. Get hold of it. It's just 15, 20 lines. 15, 20 lines. In fact, one of my students who was a pediatric doctor in Malaysia, who has 3 children, very, very dear person. And one day he called me one evening and said, "Sir, my son is going to abroad for higher education. I want you to just give a message to him." And I remember I printed this Polonius advice to leaders. I laminated, give it to him. I said, "Keep this very dear to you. It will become, it can guide you all through your life." I don't know whether he actually hung it or put it somewhere. Oh, I don't know whether he took it or not. I did my part. And in the end of it, he says, "This above all what I said." You know, one of the things he says, "Be thou familiar, but by no means vulgar. Give every man thy ear, but few thy voice. Take each man censure, but reserve thy judgment. Neither a borrower nor lender be, for loan oft loses itself and the friend." Never, ever borrow or lend money. The moment you have given, you must remember to forget it. If you're expecting it to get it back, if it comes back, it's a lottery. If it doesn't come back, remember, you lose the money and the friend. So never ever lend. If you're in a position to give it, forget it. This above all, to thine own self be true, it must follow as night the day. Thou canst not then be false to any man. Cannot be false to any person. Why? Because you are true to yourself. You're upholding the conscience. The only way you'll get to that conscience, consciousness, is the conscious. The talk is titled Conscious, Conscience, Consciousness. Unless until you're conscious of actions, you will never be able to uphold the conscience, which will lead you right up to the consciousness. This is the royal path. Chakkani Raja Margamulundaga. Sandulaye Dora Manasa. Ekkada pothunave Manasa. That's what Tyagaraja is singing in the song. Ekkada pothunavu mind. Akkada ekkada sandulo durtunavu. So Sandulo Duraku Manasa, just take the royal path, the famous Carnatic song. I had something else in mind and I didn't get into it, but never mind. Because all that matters in discussion is the mind. So the mind is the most important aspect, and we'll come back to the 26th verse. And then I remember I said this, there are a few important tips that perhaps one can take how to influence and control and govern the mind. So we'll come to this verse and we'll in fact, Keshavji is also referring, there's Abraham Lincoln letter he wrote to the headmaster. So if we can get a hold of it, we'll share it, sir. Thank you. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purna Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.